You are entering the cosmos.
Hi.
Well, hello, good evening, everybody.
It's been forever.
It seems like a very long time. Yes, we're saying this because we had a journeys earlier today. So we're doing back-to-back journeys today, and they're both very, very different. Tonight is a very special edition of Journeys, and we have three incredible guests here that are going to really get very deep into some powerful subjects. So you did see the trigger warning. If you find yourself watching this and you are getting triggered, please do not continue to watch. There are going to be some very powerful topics that we are delving into.
Yeah, I agree. Just there's no shame in setting it down, shutting it
Exactly.
down, our friends. I know like a lot of our friends and stuff want to support, but there's no
Yes.
shame in shutting it down.
That's all right. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be seeing tonight and who we're going to be meeting tonight. First, we're going to be bringing up Natasha, who her story is something that honestly, I I am so inspired by her
Yeah.
courage. If when you hear her story, you're going to think it's from a Hollywood movie, but it is all fact.
Yeah.
How did you come
And
across Natasha?
so just recently, um, she had a loss, and when she had that loss, she decided that enough was enough and she needed to do something. So she didn't know what to do. So she just kind of went on TikTok and shared her story and was really, really raw and emotional because it had just happened. And that just something about her touched me, and I just kept listening to her. And then she kept saying she didn't know what to do and she wanted to raise awareness. So I reached out to her and no pressure, but I wanted to be able to help if we could. And so we're going to help her get her story out along with the other two guests tonight are all fighting pretty much the same thing and as far as awareness goes and definitely going to be some diving into the topic of suicide, veteran
Mhm.
suicide, yeah, some deep childhood stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited, but in kind of a heavy way. Like I'm not.
Right, yeah. Well,
It's
it's
gonna
just
be.
something that we have to talk about. And, we
We
do
do
have
have to
up
talk about it.
988. If you are
Yeah,
having suicidal ideation or suicidal thought, call, text 988. We also have another 1-800
yes.
number up here. These are resources that are there to help make sure that people are not isolating or staying quiet about the things that are, in community
And
we
just
can
raising
thrive.
awareness for what we need. We need to work
Yep,
on this issue more. Like we think we're doing a lot, but we're not. Brittany Shazier just asked if this is the one I warned her about. Yes, Brittany, it
absolutely.
is.
Absolutely. So, yes, trigger
So
warning, we will be
I apologize.
discussing.
I tagged her, but I didn't think about it. That's
That's
on me.
okay. We will be discussing suicide in a very powerful, detailed way and discussing these journeys that intersect with suicide. So, yes, if anybody is having any triggers there, please do not tune in. That said, we want to bring up Natasha first. Um, she, I don't know. I don't know if I should talk about her journey or maybe we should let her talk about her journey. I
Yeah,
think it's so
she's the
much more
epitome of
impactful
courage.
to
She
have.
doesn't see the
Yeah.
courage in herself yet because it's
Oh,
still raw,
geez. Yeah.
but she is the epitome of courage.
She really is. So let's bring her up and let's meet her first. This is Natasha, and we are so grateful to have you here. Thank you for being
Hi,
here, Natasha.
Natasha.
Thank you guys. It really means a lot for you guys to have me on the show.
Well, it means a lot for
Yeah.
us because our audience is, I think that people right now in the world at all times, but particularly now coming out of quarantine, and there's some really powerful stuff going on in the world. I think people are hungering for community, togetherness, compassion, and awareness. Why don't we start off a little bit with your journey, whatever you feel comfortable talking about? Tell us a little bit about Natasha and some of the challenges that you have faced and overcome.
Okay. Um, I was actually raised in the FLDS cult here in Utah. It's called Fundamentals LDS. It's kind of an offshoot from the Mormon church. They still believe in polygamy and child marriage. It's kind of a crazy thing. We actually left the church when I was 12 and we got out. Thank goodness. It was right before everything got really crazy. If you Google Warren Jeffs,
Mhm,
you can find all sorts of information about it. Um, when I was 15, I started having flashbacks about being abused as a child, as a 3 year old and a 4 year old. I'm not quite ready to say who that is publicly. I've
mhm,
discussed it with my family. So yeah, I was molested as a child, and so a few months after those flashbacks started happening, that's the first time I actually started thinking about suicide. I had been fine up until that point. I had never thought about it before, but those flashbacks were so real and so raw and hard. I didn't know what was happening, and for a long time I didn't even think it was real. I thought I was dreaming it or making it up, and then as
mhm,
they kept coming more frequently and I knew it was real, I didn't know what to do. Um, and so I started trying to cut my wrists. I didn't know, I was trying to numb the pain. And I remember calling my older sister late one night, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, okay, we need to talk to our parents and let them
mhm.
know
Yeah.
what's happening." I am one of 19 children. So I had 3 moms growing up, polygamy. And so a lot of us kind of got lost in the shuffle. And it's kind of sad. And I know my parents did the best they could, but um, so when I told my parents, my dad and my mom and dad were like surprised because this person was like, they thought was amazing and perfect. And so they kind of almost didn't believe me at first.
Yeah.
My dad called this person the next day and he admitted to it. And all that was done about it is my dad made this person write me and my mom an apology letter. I was 15. And he wrote me a letter, and there's one thing that he said in there that I'll never forget. And he said, "We both know there was no real damage done."
Yeah, that's heavy and painful.
And that was it. That was the end of it. My parents never got me into any kind of therapy. Um, I was just left to deal with it on my own. And several years went by, and in 2000, let's see, I'm trying to get my timelines correct here. In 2002, I was just trying to deal with life, growing up. 2002, so I was 17, my almost 17, my oldest brother, Clayne, committed suicide. He put a shotgun in his mouth with his wife and 3 children at home. They're the ones that found him. And it just rocked us all to the core. He had actually tried to commit suicide several times with OD. He had been using drugs since he was like 12 years old, so he had a wicked high like drug tolerance. So he just would end up in the hospital for a few days and then be out. And so finally, he just realized that the only way to end his life was to put a gun in his mouth. And the sad thing about that is that about 12 to 18 months before he committed suicide, it had come to light that he had also been sexually abused as a child as well, about 5, 6 years old, like really like the worst you can imagine from my uncles, my dad's older half brothers. And it was just really, really tragic. And we just tried to come to grips with it. And then 3 years later, in 2005, my other older brother, David, OD'd. And based on where he was at in his time, like mentally and things like that, he, we feel like he did it on purpose because he was not in a very good frame of mind. Between this time and it was 2004, I had my first like serious suicide attempt after a hard breakup. I went to my sister's house. I knew she wasn't going to be home, and I knew she had a gun. And so I was sitting out on the back and I put the gun to my head and pulled the trigger. But I didn't know about gun safety. I didn't know about the safety switch. And I looked down and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that safety switch." So I flicked it, turned it off, and right as I was about to put it up to my head, my sister walked out. And I don't remember doing this, but she startled me and I pointed the gun at her. And she had 2 young children, and uh it was really bad, yeah. And she talked me, she got the gun away from me. And um I know that they called a couple of mental health services around the area, and they were gonna check me in, but I don't know why they didn't. My parents, I was 19 at the time,
Mhm.
but I wasn't, again, not given any much help by my family. It was
Right.
At this point in time, were you still living in the same situation?
No, we had left the FLDS church
Okay.
when I was 12. So in
Okay.
97 we left, we were actually excommunicated from the church because we wouldn't follow their crazy teachings.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you just, for the people who don't know, can you paint a little bit of a picture of FLDS and what kind of community that is? What kind of regulations are there? How is it policed? The secrecy, that kind of a thing.
Well, the FLDS church is actually very corrupt. It's mostly gone underground now because in the late 90s, early 2000s, it got crazy. My grandfather died. My
Hmm.
grandfather was the self-proclaimed prophet, and then Warren
Right.
Jeffs took over, and he's the one that actually got really into like the child brides. Like he was marrying 12-year-old little girls.
And that's your uncle.
And
Warren Jeffs is your
yes,
uncle. And he's
Warren
also
Jeffs
in the
is
penitentiary. He's serving time, correct?
correct. Yes,
Okay.
because of his practices, and they found they did. It's that's a whole other, the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah. Whole
LFLDS
other
thing. That's a
episode.
whole
Yeah.
other thing.
Hmm.
But so yeah, that's polygamy. It's brainwashing. We had church every single day, a form of church, 7 days a week, straight up brainwashing. And I was fortunate enough that my parents did have, they saw through all the crap. And
Okay.
we kind of had one foot out the door, thanks to my mom mostly. And so when it came time, and my dad was having a meeting with my grandfather, and he said, "I understand you've been harboring Gentiles," which Gentiles are people that did believe at one time. My older siblings did believe and were a part of the church, but they saw through the crap and they left.
Hmm.
And actually, Clayne, my brother that had committed suicide, he had, obviously that's 5 years later, but he had just lost his baby girl. 6 months, she died of SIDS. So we were having like a family gathering, trying to just, put it behind us. It was for the 4th of July, and all of my Gentile siblings that had left the church were over, and they were spying on us because we lived just a couple houses down from Warren and my grandfather and where we all went to school and to church and
Mhm.
everything. So they spied on us. And my dad went in for his meeting that following Monday, and my grandfather says, "I understand you've been harboring Gentiles in your home." And my dad said, "Well, if you mean my children, yeah." And my grandfather said, "Well, you can either choose a church or you can choose your children." And my dad said, "I choose my children,
Oh,
hands
thank God.
down."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we got out, and before everything got really, really crazy, because not it was just within a couple of years after that, I mean, it's like all the stuff you see on the about the child brides and all that stuff,
Right.
like that hadn't quite started to happen yet, but
Okay.
it was headed there. So I'm grateful that we got out. And I remember my mom telling me, um, that she had a conversation with my dad when my sister and I were really young. My mom had 6 children, and she told my dad, "My daughters will not be having arranged marriages. They will not be married. They will choose who they marry."
Hmm.
And so my mom, I have to give a lot of
Sounds like
kudos to
she's
my
pretty
mom.
strong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she is. She is. My mom's incredible.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of trauma that happened because again, it's so prevalent in polygamous communities because there's so many children, and like these moms are trying to do the best they can, and they're having anywhere from 6 to 10 to 15 kids. My maternal grandmother gave birth to 17 children.
Wow.
17.
Mm.
And I have over 60 aunts and uncles on both sides. When I say I have thousands of cousins, first cousins, I mean it.
Hmm.
I'm probably
Yeah.
related to half the state of Utah.
Right. Wow. Talk a little bit about the other. We have a graphic of your brothers, um,
Hmm.
because it was important to you that we see their faces, correct?
Yes.
So let me put that
Oh,
on. Do you want to talk a little
oh,
bit
okay.
about yeah, this is the,
Yes.
talk us through what we're looking at.
Okay, so Klein, um, he died on, as it says, January 9th, 2002. And then David died on Valentine's Day. So we actually, as a family, didn't celebrate Valentine's Day for many years. Um, and David was, they were both, David was battling addiction and opioid addiction and things like that, was trying to get out of a really bad relationship. I don't want to talk about this because it's like Jerry Springer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother David, his wife cheated on him with her cousin and got pregnant,
Mm.
who was
Okay.
also David's best friend.
Okay.
And David found out when this baby was like 8 weeks old that it wasn't his baby.
Oh,
Oh.
wow. That's a lot.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
got to be hard growing up in that polygamous situation with all the kids and
Mhm.
everything because you don't learn the same boundaries as we learn outside of it, right? Like the cheating
Correct.
and the cousin factor, and like you said, you're all related.
Yes. And oftentimes people are marrying their first cousins. My grandparents were first cousins, and they had mentally handicapped children because of it.
Mm.
And so, it's really unfortunate. And I apologize to any of my relatives out there that might be watching this that did marry their relatives, but 9 out of 10 times it was an arranged marriage, and they didn't have a choice because that's what the religion
Right.
told them to do. And if they
I
go
mean,
against the religion, then they're told they're going to go straight to hell, and they believe it
right.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. Um, Tell us about your other two brothers, and then we'll bring the guys up and continue our conversation. But I know that these are pretty raw. These are fresh. This just happened.
Yes, Corey. Oh, Corey. He was the poster child for mental health. He was seeing a therapist multiple times a week. He was on antidepressants. He was doing everything possible, and none of us had a clue. None of us had any clue. And we got the call, and every single, excuse me, every single one of us was in complete shock. Like, we could not believe it. And then, we just tried to get through the holidays. And then 6 weeks after Corey died, my maternal grandfather passed away of just old age. He was 97. And then 2 weeks after that, my dad died of cancer. So we had three losses in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
We were all reeling, like, just trying to hold on. I actually had a stroke after my dad's death. It was called a TIA, and because of all the stress, and we were just trying to get through it and survive and hang on. And I remember the last time I saw Brandon, we had a meeting because we were having to go to court for my dad's estate. Um, and I could see the pain in his eyes.
Yeah.
And
That's
at
hard.
that point, I was just barely hanging on.
And I'm sure you
And
recognized that pain because you were going through
mhm,
it yourself, right? Yeah.
yeah, I have 3 suicide attempts myself. And I regret not reaching out to him more. I really do. And
Yeah.
he went missing.
Hindsight,
We
right?
couldn't find him. We had a big, massive snowstorm, the last big snowstorm here in Utah. We had record breaking snowstorms this year. We had the last one that we got 5 feet in the course of like 72 hours. So he was missing for over a week, and then they found his body buried under the snow. And it, when I say that, like, gut wrenching doesn't even begin to explain
Yeah.
it. And the
And
fact that we've now lost four brothers to suicide, three of which were self inflicted gunshot wounds to the head. Ugh.
and now, okay, so the is it Brandon that just passed away, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
he's the
I
most
know he
recent.
was in the service. Were any of the
Yes.
other brothers veterans?
No.
Okay. I work with a lot of veterans, so I just was curious if that was the case, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and my sister, she was actually, Brandon, it was apparent he was reeling, he was having a hard time. She's
Yeah.
like, "Let's get you into the VA." And he's like, "No, I don't want to do that." And she tried to get him into other things, and he would back out at the last minute, and he was getting paranoid. He was acting erratically. And then the day before, 2 days before he disappeared, he spent the whole day with his mom, and he was fine. She had no
Yeah, that
idea.
happens a lot.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to know
Yep.
where somebody's at.
Yep.
Actually, so Renee, if we want to bring Jim up and Brad, but Jim can talk about this too because he does this kind of work, and Brad as well. How it can seem like everything's fine right before they actually do it. That's pretty common, isn't it, Jim?
It can be. I mean, people at times, uh, you'll see people that'll kind of, there's sometimes people will obviously be very one way or the other. I mean, the thing is, people who are coming up and planning or coming up with strategies, maybe you won't see it.
Yeah,
Maybe they're trying to, and I don't think there's always necessarily, that's the other deal. A lot of people don't always necessarily have a plan. It just
yeah,
comes down that, especially with an instantaneous or spontaneous type suicide, there's not always a plan. So,
right.
I mean, that may be the day where somebody has a really, really good day. And my key phrase is that the brain, especially in a case of PTSD or significant depression, things like that, the brain is the most deceitful thing that anybody can experience because the brain will lie
Yeah,
to you, it will deceive you, it will tell you all kinds of lies, and you can go from one place to another very quickly.
yeah. I always say that your brain it's an abuser. If you follow the pattern of what an abuser does, depression, mental illness, it's the same thing. Isolate you, you know, make you feel like you're not worth anything. Like it's a similar pattern. So similar to what you say. Um, Jim, do you want to introduce yourself and just tell everybody a little bit about you and your story and Ray of Light and how that came out?
Sure. I started, my I guess the place to really start is my father and grandfather were both veterans. I served in the Army Reserves and Guard as a medic, but part of my service was wanting to be like my father and my grandfather. My father served in Vietnam, and my grandfather served in World War II. Um, I found out when I was about 12 years old that my grandfather had died by a self inflicted gunshot wound in 1966. And right around then. And, in 2015, um, after a long struggle with going through a lot of different things with the VA from all the way from 2001 up through some really good ups and some definite, a lot of downs, we lost my father to another veteran suicide. And at the time, I had gone in and I became a therapist. Part of the reason why I went into mental health was when you could take a 6'4" soldier, a Vietnam veteran, somebody that had stowed everything away for 40 plus years, and they were willing to take and engage and get help and talk to somebody. And if you knew my dad, if he was willing to talk to somebody, then that was a place where, you know what, then I could do that.
Right.
Um,
Because
now,
I just want to say, so everybody, for full transparency, Jim is my husband's cousin, so I knew his dad as well, and it was a rough time for the family. But I just wanted people to know so that we like transparency around here.
yeah.
But
And I think one of the tough pieces being in the helping professions, whenever there's a suicide that takes place, I don't care where it is, there's always a component of guilt that comes across the board. It radiates anywhere, and I don't care. I mean, I've been on the point where, as a therapist, I've seen it, and then I had to see it as a therapist from the perspective of my father, and I took on a whole lot of that. A lot of where did I screw up? Where did I do this? What did I miss?
right,
Things along those lines. And there was a process in the healing process where my family, my mother and my brother, some of the family friends, we said, in all honesty, there's got to be a way of taking and changing things. And the VA is not adequate enough to support veterans. It
yeah,
does not have the resources, and it really doesn't have enough of the human component to connect effectively, and it really doesn't have a family connection. So we looked and came together in my mother's living room. We said, you know what, with a bunch of my mom and dad's family friends, and we said we got to come up with something, and that was where we came up with the concept of Operation Ray of Light. And honestly, this was only a few months, maybe actually, the framework came out at the funeral, and we were still reeling. Honestly, for the first 3 years, we were still reeling, um,
yeah,
and we were really hurting when we were trying to put that thing together. But we started pulling veterans together and pulling families together and trying to work on the connections. And in part, it became a cathartic process, I think, for me especially. And I know it helped a lot of other people, and I know it helped our family. But part of that was, through our process, and there was this place of through that hell was the healing, and I had to take and work through my own PTSD piece with going through that process of, the loss and the grief, and working through that and being able to really understand, and having, the same visions and the nightmares and all of these things going
yeah,
on. But one of the pieces was, I think it also amplified over a period of time. I know what the was able to gain an understanding of the immense anger and the frustration and just the nature of just in a certain way with PTSD, just being pissed off at the world and just
I hear
angry
you.
with everybody. And that was coming out all over the place. But I also was able to get in a network of working with really compassionate providers and supportive individuals. And and I went the full grommet. I tried the alcohol escape, and that didn't work. And other escapes, I gained 40 pounds. That
Oh,
didn't
I think
work.
Kiefer. Oh, there you
And
go.
really through a process of therapy, getting it to come back to wholeness. And
Yeah.
I told my therapist, I said, if you can keep me from becoming a lumberjack, going into a job of mindlessness, nothing against lumberjacks, but it's a little less heady than being a therapist. That's really what I would like to do.
Yeah.
And in that
Like not
process, we've been
not
able
not escape. That would have been an
not
escape.
escape,
Yeah.
not run away, because you know what? If we take, and this is one of those deals, if we that was one of those things. There's a place where, yeah, it would be easy to take and go hide under a carpet or become a hermit or pull everything and just close in. And this is one of those things with PTSD and with trauma and with those things. There's a desire is to like create this little box or a realm around me where it's
Yeah.
dark and closed. But that is the exact opposite of what we need. Natasha mentioned earlier community or and not Natasha, I believe it was Renee, was community compassion and togetherness. And in all honesty, that's what we started building with Ray of Light. And within the first year that we started, we had a veteran who came up and said, we started just talking at one of our Christmas events, and he started talking and talking. And within a week, he came over to the office and he was in a crisis. And we took and were able to connect with him and get him into the hospital and into a program and supports and get him into a safe spot. And we know damn well that we were able to save that at the time, get him into a safe place, get him into the supports that need to be done. And that would not have happened without the loss. So, I mean, in some
Right.
way, there's a consolation. And I
Yeah.
think that's where you take finding in your own struggles. And I think that's a big piece for our veterans, for our people, for Natasha, for a lot of people is the experiences. If we can find within our struggle and within our trauma and within all we are is to take the troubles and the hell and the difficulties that we do, and we can take that and turn it on its ear. And that's what Ray of Light really has done. And that's really
Yeah.
helping the hundreds and hundreds of veterans that we've been able to connect with and being able to bring something, a different way of healing and treatment and connection, and just being able to really bond people in who are having struggles bonding. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I have to say that it's all three of you. I mean, Natasha's fresh in her journey because she just lost her brother in April to suicide, her fourth brother, and she started this trying to raise awareness. So she's hitting the ground running, but doing it herself. Like she doesn't have a solid organization or anything like that yet. But both of you did, Brad and Jim. You both like started your organizations and now they're thriving and you're seeing the benefits of that. Brad, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in Beard of Hope or you in Beard of Hope?
um, well, first I'll start off with a little bit of my story. I'm an Air Force veteran. Served for 6 years. Was over in Iraq, and while I was there, we had mortars hitting us all the time. I volunteered at the hospital and saw some really gruesome things coming off those helicopters, and uh, all of that. And then I went through some relationship stuff with my ex-wife. Found out she was cheating on me, and that caused a lot of trauma. I was blackmailed by her mother into having sex with her. So I have a lot of trauma that I pent up and dealt with the wrong ways in that time, and um, went through some addiction with alcohol and pain pills, and dealt with the depression and everything from it for a long time. Um, and I am a survivor of 4 suicide attempts, and the last one I had in 2021 was eye opening for me. Um, I
Is that the date you have right on your
Yes,
tattoo?
yeah, that's the date I have right here. September 26th, 2021, and then I have 22 crossed out, 21 on this day because I survived
Amen.
So I was as close to death as I could have gotten and survived. I flatlined twice while I was in ICU. Doctors had me on 10 different medications trying to keep me alive. I was on a ventilator in a coma for 2 weeks. And I don't remember ever talking to God while I was in that state. But when I woke up from my coma and in the hospital, the incredible feeling I had and this passion I had um, after what I had just done was I was just like what? Like I had a passion to save people that were going through the stuff that I was going through. And I knew it was from God. I knew he put me let me go through the things that I went through to give me a story to help people. And
And you're doing
that
it.
led that led me um, to um, founding Spirit of Hope Incorporated, where I advocate for suicide prevention and PTSD, addiction, home, veteran homelessness, and other mental illnesses. And with it, I hope to eventually have my own program with facilities where I can um, have people get the mental health services they need. But at this time, I'm just paying for mental health services for veterans and other people that can't afford mental health services and sobriety programs. Um, right now, I'm planning a concert for next year as a benefit concert to raise money for a project I call Hope Village, which is going to be a tiny home community for homeless veterans and just um, veterans are our target, but we're helping everybody that we can. But the main focus of this community will be mental health and sobriety, and there will be a mental health facility on site in the community that everybody will be able to go to and get therapy and psychiatrists do medication management and then have their own home to live in. You're not. I think, in my experience, the times that I've been in the hospital and been receiving therapy and stuff like that, I felt like I was not forced to be there, but it was just like, you know, I'm in this place where I can't get out of, and that's depressing in itself. So I want this community to be a place where people can get back on track. Um, like I said, they'll have their own little tiny home with their own little yard, and I plan on having garden supplies if people want to make a garden or whatever they want to. Different things like for trades, welding, whatever. Just different things for people to do to occupy their minds while they're going through this experience of recovering,
Yeah.
so that
So,
they can find hope.
Beard of Hope. I love that. Um, I want to thank all of you because every single one of you has been through amazing, unbelievable stories and journeys. But the amazing part is that now you're all doing great things for your communities and in honor of yourself as well as your family member or like you, Brad, yourself, right? Like, I think if we build ourselves up and you do this stuff, like Jim was saying, he dove into Ray of Light, you're diving into Beard of Hope. Natasha's got her beginnings of what she wants to do for awareness. And I think it's amazing. So you all deserve a kudos for all that. Like, not everybody would. Some people would just sink back into their depression instead of climbing out or making the attempt. It's hard. I get that, but to see you guys doing it is got to be hopeful to the people you're trying to help as well, because you're not just somebody off the street. You've been there, you've seen it, you've done it, you've lived it, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be
That-
helpful.
that's one thing with my story is like coming out of the hospital. Um, I had a lot of physical recovery because I was in the hospital for a month, not getting out of bed and getting strength back and everything like that. Finding a way not to get back down into that dark place where I was at before um, was really important for me because um, it's not where I wanted to be. Like I said, when I woke up in the hospital, I had the most amazing feeling. Like God, I was
Peaceful.
full of the Holy Spirit, and that amazing feeling stayed with me and kept me from just going back into that spot. And from that,
Yeah.
um, that's really helped me grow and want to help people. So
Well, you're not alone, right? You have that feeling of faith,
yeah.
and regardless of what you believe or what your religion is, we all need something to anchor us, right? Or what's
Hmm.
the point? Like, we all need something to anchor us. Um, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
lot,
that's what
though. This
and
is a lot. It's a
I
lot.
wanted Jim and Natasha to weigh in on that about
Yeah.
what you guys are drawing on to get you through some of these incredibly difficult times that many of us would not be able to survive. Natasha, do you want to go first and then Jim follow up?
Sure. Honestly, I've kind of isolated myself a lot. It's because it's everybody that I've talked to, they're like, we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do. And I've really kind of isolated myself, which I think has probably not been the best thing because those suicidal thoughts since Brandon died have come back.
Yeah.
And I actually had to get back on antidepressants again because it got so bad. And so I have a therapist that I started seeing just before Brandon died. And then because of all of this, I was actually referred to a compound grief and trauma counselor. And
Okay.
so I'm actually having my second appointment with her on Wednesday. So it's an everyday battle, to be perfectly honest. There are some days where I don't know that I have the strength to get through the day. And I sometimes it is one moment at a time. And if I at all try to focus on anything larger than like maybe 2 days from now, I get
Right.
my anxiety goes way up. So it's honestly the best advice I can give to anybody that's having a really hard time struggling. Number one, talk about it. Like find somebody that you trust, that
Yeah.
you love, and that you can have those hard conversations with. And for me, that's been my husband. I've been very open and frank with him about it. And so just having those conversations, and then also telling friends and family. Like people ask me all the time, what can I do for you? And I'm like, honestly, the best thing that you can do for me is to reach out to me, because somebody that's down in the dumps and super, super depressed, they're not going to reach out. So the best thing to do is to actually take those steps and reach out. My aunt has been calling me every single day since Brandon died, sometimes twice a day. So that's my biggest message that I want to is that for those that are around the people, family and friends that are around that person that is suicidal, they need to step up. Like they
Okay.
got to stop saying, call me if you need anything, reach out. That person's not going to do that.
Right.
Hmm.
So if you really care and love about this person that is actively like suicidal, you got to be reaching out to them
Hmm.
every single day. If they go multiple days without picking up, you show up at their house.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's my biggest message. Like we got to stop saying, "Oh, let me reach out, let me know if you need anything." That's
Well, and it's human nature. What do we say when somebody says that? Don't worry about it,
Right.
or
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm fine. It's fine. No matter how heavy it is, sometimes we do that. It's so
What?
unhealthy, but it's just
Yeah.
ingrained in us, right? Like you don't want to be
And you,
burdened, you don't want to be, mess
right,
up
of
somebody's day,
course.
whatever.
Yeah. And
It
also,
makes
Natasha, you just mentioned like people don't know what to say, so they sort of scatter and leave you isolated. What should somebody say? This is like really helpful because a lot of people say, I've had people say that they'll say, well,
Yeah, I'd like to hear
I
them all
want
weigh
to,
in on that.
yeah, I want to help, but like I want to be there for the person, but I feel awkward and weird and I know I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to make it worse, so I might as well as just exit the whole circumstance. What are the right things that somebody should be saying when they're dealing with someone who's working through trauma?
well, the best thing that they can do is talk to them. Listen, actually. The best thing you can do is listen. Ask probing questions. A simple, what's going on in your mind right now?
Mm-hmm.
What's making you feel that way? And keep them talking and
Right.
engage with them. Um, the absolute worst thing that you can do to somebody that is suicidal is guilt trip them and tell them,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
so selfish. How could you do that? How could you hurt me and so and do that?" The That actually makes it worse.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm
keeping them
sure.
engaged and keeping that person talking,
Mm-hmm.
because 9 out of 10 times a suicidal person just wants to be heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe not have that feeling of loneliness. Just listen to what I have to say, right? Just sit with me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes it's you don't even say anything. You just sit with them.
Yeah.
And my aunt
Right.
does that. Sometimes I don't
I
feel
gotta
like
tell you,
talking.
I saw your video. I think it's the latest one, right? When you're in the basement.
That was yesterday.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you screamed in the basement, and Renee will attest to this. That a number of our coworkers and friends call me because
Mm-hmm.
I live in the woods, and I literally will open my front door and yell out my front door as loud as I can for
Vicariously,
them.
so someone could vicariously feel that. It's just that
They can
cathartic
hear
sort of release.
a
Yeah.
couple of them have it on record. They'll go, "I listened to you scream last night," because they live in the city or in an apartment or their family
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know or whatever, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we just need somebody to do what we can't too, like
Yeah.
just I'm not there. Can you just stay with me until I am? You
Yeah.
know?
Presence is very powerful. What do you think, Jim? And also, Jim, if you could weigh in on what you draw on to get through your hard times.
I think I think especially with PTSD and knowing that I kind of know that things are going to come back. We just went through an anniversary of the loss of my father, and it's always typically a difficult time. It's also springtime, which there's an amping up of a lot of more suicidality, depression, and being in the realm of therapy. There's a lot of things that are going on at that time with my clients who have been up here in the north, kind of limited by winter time. But I think there's a lot of one of the big things I think a lot of is something Natasha touched on is this piece of the communication and being able to just being able to be there. And you know what? Your presence with somebody. And I think there's an old saying, and Bradley might have seen this one before, where it talks about, sometimes there was a trauma program I was involved in before where we talked about just going and we would go into the hospitals or these traumatic situations. And
So
our role was emotional first aid. It was just being present with somebody in the worst situation in their life. And it wasn't about pulling them out of the hole. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was just about being present with them. And sometimes, you know what? It might be in the emergency room and getting somebody a ginger ale.
Right.
It might be
Yeah.
being there, and I think about this. I mean, I've got veterans right now that are near and dear to me that are in the hospital. I've got, you know, people that are seeking programs. There's people that I know that are struggling hard, and I'm not going to lie that I struggle hard at times just to try to keep everything together because I deal with this on a professional level, seeing a lot of things, and there's a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's almost when Natasha was talking in the beginning my whole chest was just like, whoa, my empath overload was,
Yeah.
my chest was just like a whole, like, just pounding right there. And this whole just total empath thing, like that happens in the office a lot of times. It's one of the first times it's gone on through like a computer, but my chest was just like, whoa, this is about like just how heavy those feelings were. I think that it's all about this connection. That's why when we do our program, we do a lot of the, like, I get 20 something veterans. We're getting together for a fishing event sponsored by another organization, and we'll be out on the boats and we'll be fishing. And that's about connection. It's about doing something together, but just it's therapeutic in itself. It's when we have our coffee and conversation that we have, it's not even really coffee and conversation. It's really coffee and connection, where veterans can come out and with their spouses and hang out and have a coffee. I think another thing that's huge is that, and it's something Bradley brought up from a spiritual perspective, is this passion. And passion can come from a spiritual perspective from God, but I think there's also a bigger piece of it that is really drawn into what we are. And I think for military people, I think it draws into our mission. What is my mission? What is my purpose? Where am I going? Why am I here? And you know what? And then maybe that's the piece that we really need. And I think that's one of those things that for a while after my dad passed, that was one of those things that was really difficult, was why did I do all of this work and why am I here? And now I know what my purpose is in an everyday way. Within 2 weeks after I came back to work, I had a kid in my office who was really struggling because they had lost a parent due to the same means that I did. And those things are the reasons why you're here. There's mission and there's purpose. And I think one of these things is there's a reason behind driving and having purpose. Right. And I think that's really it's and I think that's a bigger part too for establishing something within it can be utilized within the veteran community. I think where Bradley and I kind of are looking from, I think where is sometimes we look at people and we look at them with the disease or the whatever and put a little marker on the forehead. Oh no, somebody's got PTSD. They came back from war, which is not the way we always talk about it. Like Operation Ray of Light is a veteran and family empowerment organization. It's about empowerment. It's not about, I don't care if you're 100% disabled. You know what? If you're 100% disabled, you still have huge assets to bring out to your community, because you know what? Bradley has got a huge mission. And that mission and the dreams and the aspiration that he has are fueled by passion and a beard.
The beard.
I mean,
it's all about the beard, Bradley.
It's all about passion, fueled by passion, beard, and maybe a little rip it. Who knows? I mean,
I know. I'm always telling Bradley at some point maybe we'll all end up at the same event, because I do a lot with veterans as well.
And I think this is, and one of those things, Natasha, there's a starting point in remembering going back 8 years and thinking about those beginning inspirations and where it came from. But the deal is too, is that you're going to gain from the people that are around you. You're going to learn and gain more and more from people. You're going to, I think about all the veterans that I've met, the ones that that you go to an event and, we do a lot of ice fishing during the wintertime up in the Northeast is kind of brutal sometimes. And when you're building programs and you're just like, somebody takes and cooks for you or does something and you know what, and people are smiling, or you bring out a fire pit on the ice that somebody committed to build for you, and you're bringing out people, and there's this connection. And then when people take and go down into their pit and it's dark and they feel like they're alone, maybe they're sending you a text and saying, you know what, buddy, yeah, I'm struggling. And you got
somebody to reach out to.
And you got a community. And I think, self-care, I would not be able to do the work today. I think there's a huge pit for Brad, for Natasha, for all of us. I think it comes down to self-care. You talked about the brain. We talked about the brain's deception. Not just the brain, but the whole body needs to be taken care of. It's so significantly huge, I could not do the work without making sure I get my gym time in. it's important. Being able to have that release of energy. I think with PTSD and with depression, anxiety, you know what, taking good care, taking care of your medications, Natasha, talking to people, you know, taking and working on your self-care regimen. So important for people that care about other people and that are going to put themselves on the front line. Because you know what, Natasha is a healer and Brad is a healer and M in her way is a healer. And when you're a healer, you have to have, there's that place that really making sure you're taking care of the healer. And that's a big lesson learned, and making darn sure that you're taking care of the healer. So, you know, I mean, and I think that's where you're just developing that fire. And you know what? And if you go down and you're the healer, make sure you're telling somebody and you're talking to somebody and being able to say, you know what? You know, Brad takes and says, you know what, Jim? Hey, man, I'm feeling down right now. He shoots a text over to Jim and says, you know what, man? I'm feeling kind of down. You can share the struggle. We can sit in the trench together.
No worries, Brad. We all got kids.
Time together.
We have a question, which is, does being a part of an online community help any of you who have suicidal thoughts or those who struggle?
Hi, little one.
I would have to say it does, because you know, I started the TikTok literally a few days after Brandon died, and like the people that I mean, I don't even have 400 followers, but I have a few people that are actively engaged and watch my videos every single day, and they genuinely care. And I would say sometimes it's not very easy to talk to a family member or a friend. And so I would say being a part of an online community is very important and beneficial for somebody that is having a hard time.
Yeah, Jim or Brad, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. For me, I'm not a very sociable person, so a lot of my stuff in the beginning, I still am still active, is doing online groups. I have a group from TikTok that I'm a part of called the Wolf Pack. It was started by a lady that is on TikTok, and she has a group that we talk and share stuff in, and if we're having a bad day. Also, one of the programs that I support. Sorry, one of the programs I support, Beyond Sober. They're like all online. It's an online sobriety program. They have, I don't know if you ever heard of the app Marco Polo. They have a Marco Polo group that they get on there, and they give each other encouragement, or if they're having a bad day, they get on there and talk. And you know, online groups are, I would say, just as good as in person, in most aspects.
Okay. Yeah.
And Jim, what do you think about online? I don't know that you do a lot online, do you? I know you have your group, but most of yours is in person, correct?
I mean, there is. I think gaining what knowledge can be done through online. Most of our activities have been, you know, more in person. I think that's better for connection. But I mean, that doesn't mean that, like, our Facebook community is a lot of times where our instant message pages, we do have a lot of our veterans who are a little more introverted. So. Right. You know, connection might be through an instant message blip about something, and then we'll throw something back and forth, which is kind of I mean, I've had to learn to be a little bit more savvy, and, you know, becoming a therapist during COVID, we had to learn to do certain things through online. I would hope that at some point, you know, if I can find either tech support or a 12-year-old, that I might be able to increase an online presence, and that would be a goal down the road. But one of those things is, I do think there are groups that I'm involved in with, between learning things about veteran community, things like that, and different resources that are helpful. I do think that there are a lot of resources that are available. I think the thing is, though, too, I think it's super, super important to, especially now with the end of COVID, and the importance is that we do need, we were kind of sold a little bit of a bill of goods that you can get all of what you need through online. And
Yeah,
I'll tell you what,
I
even
can
Amazon
really,
can't get you everything you need online.
right.
They'll try to tell you they can, but Amazon is not going to get you everything you need online. And I think there's a big piece where there is that piece. Yeah, we might have the foundational piece. I've met a ton of veterans online through our Facebook presence and
Right.
things like that. But that real pushing as an initial piece, it's great. But I think there's this piece really trying to push ourselves forward to meeting more people and connecting with more people. And you know what? I like it. I mean, I was sitting down talking to a guy last week, one of my a Navy veteran. He says, you know what? Ideally, I am just I am a social recluse. I'm like, yeah, but you're out here with me. He's like, but I'm a recluse. I'm like, okay, well, you're a recluse, but you're out. Good deal. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever, it
Yep.
works.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we're taking that's okay. You know, it's let's get, you know, I mean, I think there's a big piece of getting people out and back together the way it was. And I think there's
Yeah.
another thing is where, you know what, people are a lot nicer in person than they are online. It's just
Sometimes I
the
have to
reality
agree.
of the world.
Sometimes
true.
that is true.
There's a
Yeah.
reality that and maybe we can take it, you know, there's maybe I think we can achieve a lot more through that, but I think
Yeah.
there's means and initial communication, a lot of things that can grow from it, but it's always a great initial piece. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you know, I'd encourage anybody who is strictly just online, try to reach out with those groups that are in your community. You know, looking at
Yeah.
for Natasha and for Bradley, look at your networking opportunities, because I'll tell you what, I mean, in Maine, we're a little tiny state up here, and there are huge networking opportunities with other
Yeah.
organizations. And these guys who have already got boots on the ground and resources like with mental health and things like that, learning those tools and having them in your toolbox up here for what you might be able to get, Bradley or Natasha, are tremendous. You know, looking at NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness, or having these different types of tools, you know, can be huge assets. You know, and meeting different people, and when you get face to face, there's just so much more. I think sometimes that you
Yep.
can just
Right.
be like, I know who to send you to.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I think too, like online, so I don't care for support groups online that are just chat, like they talk back and forth, because I feel like every day I hear somebody's horror story. And so for me, that does not lift me up and make me feel hopeful, right? But I also belong to a lot of groups where we video chat and we talk and
Yeah.
we are all open. And for me, that's much better than just typing, right? Or texting. But I mean, I think even if we're a recluse, human contact is pretty vital to human beings,
It
like in
is. Yeah.
general.
I think
I
it's a
mean,
both
like
and. I think
Natasha,
we need both. I think the
yeah,
online is a great way to enhance and amplify our experience and to expand, especially if you're isolated. But it's not always a complete substitute for physical touch, for a hug, for somebody to physically be
hearing somebody's
present.
voice, yeah.
Yeah. Some of those things, even biologically, can really help. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing we've run into, or I've run into, is knowing somebody is in crisis or needs help and they only want to be online, and there's only so much you can do. You know, you don't know where they live for sure if you don't know them well. You don't, so there's like, you feel
If they're in a crisis, yeah. An
helpless, right?
emergency situation.
You
Yeah. An
don't,
emergency.
yeah,
Right.
like you can't. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but
But
because definitely
community, no matter
online is
how,
the way,
yeah,
like Jim was
no
saying, a
matter how
12
you
year old.
can get it. Yeah. I mean, I think
I
just,
joke all the time
yeah,
about StreamYard and the kids that come in. I'm like, oh my
yeah.
God, you look 12
Right.
It's
when I'm
right.
trying to
Yeah.
go to
But
meetings
the
and stuff. Yeah.
answer really at the end of the day is what I'm hearing everybody saying is just not to stay isolated, to make sure you have at least one confidant just anybody that you can talk to not go within yourself into that secrecy or silence that closes you off from everybody else. Just try to talk to somebody. And there are resources. If you don't have anyone in your life, we do have the number up here in the description. We also have all of the links up here. You can follow Natasha, what Bradley is doing, what Jim is doing, all of the links. We have them in the description so that this conversation actually can continue after this show. It's just a very big it's just a very deep thing that humanity is going through right now. And I know that loneliness is something that people are talking about as playing a big role in mental health issues. So the more that we are connecting, no matter how we're able to do it, I think that's probably always a win. This conversation could go on forever. Like I said, we will continue it by following all of these wonderful guests that we have. Natasha will probably be on another show soon, right, Em? We're
June
hoping
27th.
June 27th.
We
So
have
you will
her
be,
and
yeah,
Brittany, and that's going to be, Brittany was escaped from a child marriage when she was young, and then Natasha will share her story of
in greater depth. We'll get
the
to
cult.
know Natasha
Right,
a little
about
bit
the
more.
FLDS. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep,
excellent.
we can talk more
So
about that.
that's going to be extremely eye-opening, and especially for anybody who knows somebody who might be associating with a cult or any sort of abusive situation. I think it's really
Yeah.
interesting to talk about these things so we can stay empowered and autonomous and make sure we're always making our own decisions and consenting to whatever is happening in our lives. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This has been such a powerful episode. Everybody go to the links, all of the links that we have here. Follow these wonderful people and tune in again to see Natasha in June. We will be having a greater in-depth conversation with her. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, MM, for producing, coordinating everything, hosting, wearing a million hats. This is a fantastic episode. I myself feel like I'm a much happier, healthier person, better connected person for having this discussion. So thank you to everybody in the audience for tuning in.
Yep, thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Burn It Down we'll be back next week, and then we have two
Right.
guys talking about movies at 10 p.m. tonight live. So hope to see everybody there. Good night, everybody, and thank you.